From moderation to innovation. Welcome in Rzain Society podcast. Today we are with Pavel Afanasiev and we are speaking about his journey from political gaming. It's a really innovative and interesting professional journey where Pavel is sharing about political gaming insights, funding challenge, incubation experience, user engagement, and tons of really exciting topics. So if you like this episode, give it a like and don't forget to subscribe. Have a good one. Take care. Bye bye. Hello everybody, it's Claire from Rzain Society. I'm super excited today. I'm with Pavel Afanasiev. I'm super excited. He's doing an amazing game and I can't wait to share more. Today we are going to speak about something I care a lot about, new origin, pioneering innovation in gaming and politics, especially with a really innovative games. And we are going to touch base also on investment and all the story of investment, which is something Pavel gets a lot of knowledge about. So, hello, Pavel, how are you doing?
Hi, Claire. It's a pleasure to be here. Thank you very, very much for the invitation. I'm doing great, and let's get going.
I'm super excited to have you. Northern Lights has been a new project, and now I'm really following closely. So, Pavel, could you start by telling us a bit more about your journey to co-founding Northern Lights Entertainment and your role at the Station F building what is going to be the next massive multiplayer politics?
Yeah. It's a long story, but to keep it short, basically, I was a lead moderator in a very large MMO browser game that was originally created by a couple of Russian rebel developers on Flash in 2007, and it was based on the very iconic Heroes of Might and Magic franchise, which obviously today is owned by Ubisoft. And basically they took the tactical combat of that game and they turned it into a turn-based combat game in an MMO setting. So very, very interesting. And I was the lead moderator there. At the height of its peak, the game had like 40,000 concurrent players at any time of day. It was tremendously successful. It still exists today, but obviously with a much lower player count. And basically, I made the observation back then, and I was still in high school. Like I was 16 years old when I became the moderator there. I am no longer 16, just so we're clear. But basically, I made this observation that players who stay within the game for the longest time and players who spend the most money in the game, because it was unfortunately a pay-to-win game, basically they have one characteristic in common, which was that they're extremely involved in the political interactions that occur in this virtual world. So everything related to clan warfare and alliances and diplomacy and backstabbing each other and espionage and the intrigues, but also like on a very interpersonal level, like a player A doesn't get along with player B and they challenge them to a duel, like and like there's a code of honor to be respected, or somebody insulted someone on the forum and so you want to settle your differences. It's all very political, right? And basically, what was really interesting for me is that all of these political interactions were happening outside of the gameplay, because it was happening on forums, on chat rooms. Like Discord didn't exist, like we're like in 2009, 2010. So it was all, Skype and TeamSpeak and ICQ, because we were, in Eastern Europe. So, and basically it created a question in my mind, which was, well, what if those politics actually were playable and they were integrated into your gameplay experience and they were tied to your player progression systems, and the decisions of a player or a group of players could actually influence the game state, to use a technical term, and it kind of got the wheels spinning, and like that's kind of the origin story. Like, and as a side hustle, I studied in Sciences Po Paris. I'm a political science major, so is my co-founder Julie, and basically like that's kind of where because we're both super passionate gamers, that's kind of where politics and games kind of combined in our heads. And we started informally working on the project in 2016, and we created the studio in 2018. Just a couple of months after we graduated from university, and uh, we started like very much as industry outsiders. Like we did not work, in large studios. We never worked at a big publisher. We worked in related fields. Like I used to work in tech for a little bit, and Julie used to work at Canal Plus, which I'm sure you know. Um, and so we had like bits of relevant experience, but we also are bringing this kind of fresh perspective as to what games could be, and perhaps in from an innovator's perspective should be in the future. And so that's how we got started. So we started, without connections, without money, without a team, and gradually over the course of several years, we've built everything up piece by piece, and then structured the team and built a prototype, and obviously did our Kickstarter campaign, raised a little bit of funding with investors, built a little bit more, expanded the team, re-raised a little bit of funding. So it's a very continuous journey. But yeah, we're super super excited to be on this. It's definitely an adventure, but it's a long-term adventure. So we're not necessarily talking, about the project of a year or of 2 years. It's more of a it's a decades-long journey that we're on.
100%, and I think it's really inspiring, and I'm also really happy that you are here to speak about it, because I feel like really often people, especially working in corporation, who never started a project, don't realize, oh, you start from zero, you need to build everything, and it's a marathon. It's not it's not a race. It's not like you are going to meet one investor, is going to give you money, down, the work is done. No, like you will need to have work before. And as you said, like you started in 2016, as like an official project. Can you tell us a bit more about this period? Like, how did you do to survive? How did you make your Kickstarter campaign as well, which I'm really impressed about? Like, do you have more details about this?
So the informal phase of the project was between 2016 and 2018. It all basically started with a paper that I wrote as part of an entrepreneurship class, where basically I was described, like, the assignment was, you have to propose an innovative business of any kind in any industry. The only constraint was that it had to be legal. And basically, well, since I had this idea around politics and games spinning in my head for a while already, and I had my experience in games moderation and community moderation, I was like, well, I mean, that's a perfect opportunity. Let me just throw it out there and see what happens. So I wrote the paper. I got a pretty bad grade for it. Um, but that's courtesy of the French educational system, But that's okay. And basically I was like, but no, but this grade cannot be like a reflection of reality, right? Like there's something there. I think the proposition is interesting. So I started kind of spreading this paper around me, to people who were my classmates, to people who were gamers, to some of the community members of the game where I used to be the moderator, and basically the feedback that I was receiving from potential users was significantly better than the feedback that I was receiving from my teachers.
Never trust French.
No, I wouldn't go as far as to say that, and because obviously, like, a lot of my classmates, were French, and they, I think, are on the right side of history in that regard. Um, but what was really interesting was that, like, you have to put it in the historical context, right? 2016, Trump just got elected. Macron is about to be elected in a few months. The Brexit vote just happened. And so basically, there is a lot of this political frustration that is building up in citizens around the world, and it doesn't really matter which country you're in, because it's a very universal phenomenon. And obviously, tensions are running really high, and people are starting to kind of fight about it on social media, and families are sometimes kind of torn apart because of the mother votes for candidate X, and the daughter what votes for candidate Y, and they like strongly disagree. Um, and we were like, okay, there is something about political tensions that is not getting released in real life, because the systems are locked, they're very difficult to change, you cannot rewrite a constitution of a country and so on. But games are actually perfect for running experiments and delivering fun. And so the core concept that we were exploring during this informal phase for 2 years, almost 2 years, was to what extent can we actually um, find a way to liberate this pressure, this tension, in the form of a game, and to what extent would this resonate with an audience that isn't just your kind of hardcore gamer audience, but actually like an audience that would be significantly broader, and that would be more inclusive of of more senior citizens, of female citizens, and so on. So like how can we basically start with something that is built for gamers, but is sufficiently appealing as a value proposition to attract a new audience to the kind of game that we were thinking about. And so that was what the first 2 years were about. And when we felt really strongly about the customer feedback and the user interviews, of which we have done many, many, many dozens, in the hundreds actually, probably. It was only then that Julie and I actually decided to take the leap and create Northern Lights Entertainment as a legal entity in 2018, in October 25th, 2018, to be exact.
Nice. A game we definitely need it. And, like I feel it's, like the perfect example of an entrepreneur project that really makes sense, resonate with people as well, and get a really impact, which what I'm all about. Like my favorite games are all about impact. So I value a lot your game actually. And so when did you start it actually to build the project? Is it something you made in 2016? Is it something you outsourced? And how did you finance basically getting to this stage?
We do everything in house. I mean, we used a couple of kind of freelancers before our very first Kickstarter campaign, because we needed some help on putting together the trailer. So we outsourced not the production of the asset, but just kind of the editing and some of the special effects, because we didn't have anybody at the time within the team to help us with that. And we outsourced the music component of it, which I think is fairly standard within the industry as well. But the rest of it, it was all done in house. It still is. And basically on the funding side, we started, Julie and I, with basically our own money, which wasn't a lot, like not nearly enough to build an MMO game. We put like our personal savings, like from the jobs that we used to work, and it was like I think 17,000 euros in total. So clearly not an MMO budget, but we were young and we didn't know better, or maybe we did know better. I mean, I guess the future will show. Um, and basically with that we applied for a tech grant here in France, the famous 30,000 euro subsidy, in order to basically build a prototype and constitute your kind of proof of concept. So we got that, and based on this total funding, we basically put together like the concepts around the game, a game design description, like a very rough trailer, some visuals, and so on. And fairly quickly, within a year of the creation of the studio, we were like, okay, we feel like we're kind of past this initial stage. And like we need to get some commercial validation for the project as well, because like it resonates with people, as you said, Claire, in principle, like, oh, a politics game, yeah, that sounds exciting and so on, but is it actually like commercially viable, or can it be? And so the purpose of our Kickstarter campaign was to validate the monetization model of the game, which is free to play with cosmetic microtransactions. And so what we were essentially selling or pre-selling on Kickstarter is essentially skins and customizations and some quality of life items that would be made available to the players within the game after the delivery and after the delivery of the project. And so we were super poor at the time. Our marketing budget was like a phenomenal 450 euros in total. And despite this obstacle, we managed to sell for over 42,000 euros worth of stuff on Kickstarter, which for us felt like a real win. And based on distraction, we were like, okay, like we have a proof of concept, the commercialization model is attractive, let's go. And we wanted to raise our first round of venture funding, and we can circle back later on as to why we decided to go the venture capital route and not the publisher route. But basically, we decided to raise this very first round, the pre-seed round, and then COVID happened, so we had to put a pin in that. And there were a lot of kind of counter wins that we had to face. We basically took a loan from a bank, from our commercial bank, and together with the Kickstarter money, we kind of survived the first two lockdowns here in France, and we ended up actually raising our first round of 325,000 euros in 2021. So a year kind of after we initially decided that we needed extra capital. And
And this is like a real success. And like just to zoom out, like you built already your product. You had kind of a sense of product market fit because you had this Kickstarter, like campaign where people they bought outfits and so on, so skins in your game. So you had like the interest. And would you say like this was something that was essential, even precede to get the interest of VCs or not? Because like this is like really early, early picture, and like we also like speedrun A16 saying, oh, you only have an ID, but you are X, I don't know, if this company, come join us, even if you don't have a prototype. So, I mean, I'm really curious about this.
So I think we have to be very careful with the terms that we use. I think it is very ambitious and potentially pretentious for a pre-seed stage company to talk about product market fit. I don't think we had product market fit. I think we had a proof of concept. I think that's a fair term to use at the stage we were at, because let us be very honest. Like at the time when we did our Kickstarter campaign, we had a trailer, we had a solid description of the game, we had a really good idea as to like what were the game mechanics that we wanted to implement, but there was fairly little work actually done in terms of coding the game. Prototype was super buggy. Like it wasn't like it wasn't as far advanced as we are now. So I don't think we can talk about product market fit at this stage and at the pre-seed stage in generally. And I would be very careful with the terminology in general, because there's a lot of kind of terms that are being thrown around, not just in the venture capital industry, but in general, like in the world of startups, and everybody kind of has their own definition as to what product market fit means, and this leads to uh, kind of inflation of everything. The term pre-seed funding didn't exist until maybe like less than a decade ago. Like seed funding was used to be like your maybe idea stage or slightly beyond the idea stage, you maybe have like a prototype. Now when you talk about seed funding, especially for games, quite a few funds are going to be asking, okay, so how many thousands of daily active users do you have? How many, what are your, day 90 retention metrics? I'm exaggerating a little bit, obviously, but that's the idea. And so I think we have a language problem in the industry, and I think people are kind of overusing certain terms, which kind of depreciates the experience for a lot of the founders in the industry.
Yes, 100%. So do you think like, I mean, nowadays, like prior speaking to a VC, you should have something or you can come up with an idea?
I think it, unfortunately, it depends on who you are. Let's imagine you are, as you said, an ex Blizzard, on an ex Riot, or an ex insert your favorite studio of choice, a product manager or marketing manager or producer or lead developer or whatever. There used to be a time between 2019 and 2022 ish where you could just roll up into the offices of a number of venture capital funds, whether they're based in the United States, or here in Europe, and people were very willing to throw like somewhere between $5 to $15 million at you, just because you have a certain pedigree and you have worked on a certain super successful game. Now, Mitch Lasky, who's a general partner at Benchmark, a very successful venture capital firm, calls this practice pedigree chasing, and it's actually, I think, and I agree with him, very counterproductive, because if you think about the founders of a lot of those super successful venture funded companies, if you think about the founders of Riot, if you think about the founders of Blizzard, if you think about the founders of Valve, like they didn't necessarily have an amazing gaming background, prior to them creating a studio that then went on to become a huge success. And now it's very ironic and perhaps even damaging to the industry that a lot of the investors are basically seeking this kind of markers of social recognition in founders, but you have to understand where they're coming from, right? Like if you have a fund that has like $500 million to be invested, you have your own investors, the limited partners, who obviously, one, don't want to lose their money, two, ideally want to make more money based on that investment, and you have to find a framework, a logical framework that allows you as an investor to underwrite a certain level of risk. And obviously one of the riskiest things in games is that we don't always know in advance what is going to make or break a very successful game, or is it going to be a hit for like 2 months and then it's going to die, or is it going to be a hit for 12 months and then it's going to die, or is it going to be a forever game, which is kind of a lot of people are aiming for. And when you're managing a $500 million fund, one of the things that investors have kind of internally agreed to that they can show to their investors in order to accept that level of risk is basically looking at the quality of the founders, or the profile of the founders, and this includes obviously where have they worked before, what they have worked on, how successful that thing that they worked on was. And that's kind of, I think, unfortunately, the reality where we're in. Now, obviously, this is not the same mindset if you have a fund that is only $10 million or 20 or 30 million, because obviously this allows you to write much smaller checks. And because your individual checks are going to be, between 100 to maybe $500,000 each, the level of risk that you can accept per check is significantly higher, one. And two, it allows you to spot and invest in teams that are much, much earlier, and that, that are building more interesting, I guess, more experimental things in the gaming industry.
Makes total sense. At the same time, I'm thinking like I'm not sure, to be honest, it's the way to go profitable. I think maybe, like they think like people, that worked at, I don't know, like King or whatever, Review and so on, know how to make $1 billion game. From experience, I would say, when you work in a corporation, it's not like you are the founder of the company. Far from this. I think, like the best experience you have, it's actually in startup, because you are working really close with the founding team. If the founder have time, they can explain you how it works and how to do better. You also can impact. I wouldn't say personally in any corporation I worked for that it was what taught me to do something that was either scalable or profitable. And I can even say, now I'm doing consulting with a small slash mid-sized studio, and they are the most profitable one with really short payback. Even if they don't have the scale, they have the honor to get the profit. So I think, like, unfortunately, here, like, we are kind of, um, in the corner of what VC once again knows and don't know. Of course, it's easy to know Riot Games. It's less easy to know all games, the story of games. So the games is something that is quite new, mobile games. And same goes, on the developer. Like 10 years ago, I was speaking with some founder that were looking for investment in Turkey. They didn't add any investment. And now Royal Match is out of there. Turkey is one of the leading markets in gaming. They are, like, they have set the standard, being the top grossing game and so on and so on. But you still always need like the first one to make it happen. And I think it's something VCs, are not taking into consideration. And I don't think actual, either European or US companies get this knowledge. So like when you tell me I come from something that is not gaming, I get a fresh eyes and so on, I'm much more excited, and I will much more bet on you than someone, that, worked in corporation, but at the end of the day was doing the same job as 10 different people, basically.
I quite agree with you there, and I think there are two things that are very important to keep in mind. It's one thing to be successfully operating within a large studio like Blizzard, like Riot, like King, that has a lot of people and that has a lot of already integrated support systems. You have people who do HR, you have people who do finance, you have people who do marketing, you have people, who do legal. So a lot of these kind of support functions are inbuilt and internalized within those large companies because they're designed this way, and that's good for them. But having been like a really good producer or like a really stellar developer at one of those studios does not automatically give you the necessary skills to being a really good founder. And that's and it's a difficult skill because when you start your own studio, you do not have those support systems, and you actually have to deal with a lot of these support related issues yourself. And obviously there was a moment between 2019 and 2022 where a lot of VC money was being invested into companies founded by ex operators of those studios, and I hope sincerely for them that they all will come to success, and we're going to see an amazing wave of new games coming out created by these studios. But the sentiment on the ground when you walk around, GDC or Gamescom, or when you spend some time kind of in the corridors of the hotel. Of the hotels where a lot of the business meetings are happening. Unfortunately, for an important percentage of these studios, we're just not seeing the quality of the progress within those games, and the quality of the metrics, and the size of their communities that would actually justify this initial investment. And so once again, I wish nobody any harm, and I hope all of these games are going to come to life and be successful. But right now, as of the recording of this interview in June 2024, it doesn't always look as great to be investing in X whatever big studio founders as it seemed back in the day.
100%. And like, even when you have a look at what is growing in our gaming industry, it's definitely, like APAC market, MENA market, and so on. And there is no few, like, no, there is no X people. Like, you need to build. Like, it's basically like you need to do something new. So I'm totally aligned. And so actually now,
Just
yeah,
sorry, there was a second thought that I had, that So there is obviously this concept of a reinforcement loop, right? Um, and you touched upon this when you said like well, Turkey used to be not a thing in games, and then obviously Peak Games came out of there, and then Dream came out of there, and obviously like the founders of Triple Dot have Turkish origins as well. So um, there is this reinforcement learning loop that takes place in games. Like, okay, we've proven it once. Now let us take the thing that works and iterate around it a little bit so that we can kind of make the next Royal Match or the next Monopoly Go or the next Clash of Clans. um, it's a good um, it's a it's a good technique. It used to work really well, but it's not without its risks and dangers as well, because at some point, if the only kind of points of data and points of feedback that you're integrating into your next iterations are from things that you have already done before, then at some point you're just recirculating and you end up in this never-ending loop of games that all feel the same, all have the same gameplay, all have the same kind of overall meta, and it becomes extremely difficult for new games that come to market to differentiate themselves from the things that are already there. And this is how you end up with like a million clones, and this is how you end up like with puzzle games that kind of all feel and look the same. And I think the industry is very long overdue for being more open-minded towards professionals who do not come from the games industry, but who come from the world of media, or who come from the world of tech, or who come from the world of cinema maybe, and so on. And so to incorporate alternative approaches to storytelling, alternative approaches to distribution, to marketing, to game design, to meta gameplay, and so on. And I think it's been a very much like insider baseball for a very long time. And like I mentioned Triple Dot earlier, but like one of the co-founders of Triple Dot actually used to be, I believe, a product manager at Facebook before he actually came down to create the studio, which today is hugely successful. And he himself on podcast says, like, guys, like, without my experience at Facebook and operating the data platform and the marketing efforts there, I wouldn't have had the insight to do the thing that I'm doing today, which is obviously hugely successful.
I agree. Like, I think the silo is really against the innovation. Whatever what you do, it's the same. Like, if you want to be a good founder, don't do only marketing all your life. Like, also be curious about other things, because at some point you will have to manage it. And like me, I started in dating at Match Group. Now what I see, I'm sorry, but all the AI game with voice chat and so on and so on, it's Lexa in Mythic, which is like a dating chatbot. So like, it already existed like 10 years ago. Same about, image recognition at Mappy with the Google Maps of France, and so on and so on. So I think, from my perspective, I'm totally aligned with you. Having like something that comes out of gaming is, from my perspective, what is the most successful, and where personally, if I would have a fund, I would go for. And it's kind of a pity that people owning the capital at the end of the day are not seeing it yet. But I think a lot of good examples are coming with a lot of new founders. And Pavel, you are one of those, because I think, your game speak by themselves. So why, at the end of the day, did you decide to pivot now, just to circle back on funding, into the VCs?
So we've asked ourselves, Julie and I, this question, like, should we go publisher or should we go VC, quite early on? And the reality of it was that when we approached several publishers, and I won't name any names because I have tremendous respect for these people, but basically the overwhelming and the overarching feedback was that your value proposition of the game is super amazing. It's very much in tune, with the spirit of the time or zeitgeist. But we have no idea how to publish a political game. Like, we've never done it before. We don't know how to do it. And So we were like, okay, so what you're telling us is that as a publisher, you would then subsequently be taking somewhere between 30% in the best case and 70% in the worst case of revenue share of the game for something that you're telling us you don't know how to do. And like just the economics of it didn't make any sense to us. And so we basically, like, after having, those conversations with publishers, and we looked at some of the agreements that were in place in the market at the time. We decided that this wasn't it rationally didn't make sense, and so we decided to go after VC money instead. And yeah, that's how the decision making process has been. Now, obviously, it came with its challenges too, because yes, Julie has worked in media. Yes, I have worked in tech, but we weren't connected to the world of venture capital, which is kind of like a subsection of the world of tech. And then finding people who actually invest in games is a subsection of the world of venture capital, which in itself is a subsection of tech. So it's very difficult. It has been a very challenging journey. We had to build our network from scratch. I mean, LinkedIn is probably like my best friend by now. And it was a lot of cold outreach, and it was a lot of hours spent sourcing for potential investors, trying to identify the messages that work with them, the messages that don't work with them, how to find your way around the tech conferences, and how to build like pitch decks that are oriented towards venture capitalists and not towards publishers, because there's a very different beast. um, and it was an amazing learning journey. And I mean, obviously we've raised VC funding to date, twice actually, and but we still continue to learn, because the practices of venture capital are evolving as well. And like, your networks have a tendency to depreciate over time, so you have to make an effort um, to maintain them, and keep people updated and keep people excited about what you do. So it's a very difficult road, but we had a very rational economic reason for not going the publisher route.
Makes total sense, and actually, totally can relate to this journey. So just reflecting back, because you succeeded, like you made 2 rounds, which is actually amazing and a real success, no matter how much, by the way, you raised, because we know even getting $1 from them is definitely a journey, and also a process. Just to give a bit of context to the audience, even like when you are pitching, so where you show you get this meeting where you show your deck, you are pitching to a VC that is going to pitch it to another VC, who is going to have a meeting about it, so and repitch for you. So it's definitely something that is not that much straightforward. So what would you say was your biggest mistake, and what is your biggest tips for our audience?
I think our biggest mistake was not appreciating enough how long the process takes for both of our rounds. And so that was one. And I think the other mistake which we did for the second round was starting the race too early, before sufficient progress was made between the last round and the next one. So clearly, kind of, I think what we should have done instead is kind of keep people updated, and send them kind of consistent reports as to where we stand and what the progress is and so on. But I think we should not have been starting the second race as early as we have, and it probably would have saved us a lot of headaches. Now, the other thing, I don't think it's a mistake on our part, but it's just internally we have this joke, Julie and I, that we survived the four horsemen of the apocalypse because we survived, through the labor unrest in France, and we survived COVID, and we survived the arrival of a lot of Web3 projects that kind of took over the gaming investment space for a little while, and but then they came and they went, and and obviously, like, gaming industry faced a lot of supply shortages, with the console wars and the difficulty of the PS5 deliveries, that became a meme. So we kind of joke about it, but really, the uh, the tech crash of 2022, when the Nasdaq and the majority of tech stocks came down, really turned the taps off on venture capital for quite a while. I think, and this is a projection, I'm manifesting. I think we're entering, very very cautiously, but I think we're entering a growth phase again. I do see a little bit more deals being done these days in games compared to late 2022 and the entirety of 2023. But by no stretch we're out of the woods yet. It's just that there are some new funds that have recently been raised, and obviously they have money to deploy, but there is a lot of investors out there that are still feeling very risk averse. Um, and obviously you can't really blame them, because if you can get a risk-free return on your investment of like 5, 6, 7% just by going into the bonds market, or like 10% by going into stocks, suddenly venture capital doesn't look all that attractive by comparison. And so um, yeah, it's a very weird dynamic these days. But yeah, those I think were our mistakes and the things that we failed to anticipate. But I mean, if we could anticipate the crash of the tech market, we would be in a very different place today.
Fair, fair. But you also did a lot of good things. So, what do you think you did well, and what would you advise to our audience?
I'm very proud of the way we've designed and structured our playtests. We've done quite a lot of in-person tests. We've done them online as well. One of the things that I think I'm the most proud of was a session that we did at a school, actually, and it was a session that involved 49 concurrent players at the same time in real time, which was quite impressive. But it was all the more so impressive because the demographic of that audience was young people between kind of 18 to 21, 22. So not necessarily the demography of people to whom you would come with a political themed game. And it always warms my heart when I think back to this. But like we asked them a question like, oh, so before the session began, how many did you think that the politics game could be fun? And out of the 49 hands, there were like maybe four hands up, maybe five. And then at the end of the session, like after they had played, and by the way, they played for double the time that we had actually allocated to the playtest. They played for like around 2.5 hours instead of what was initially planned, like an hour 15 or so session. Um, like out of the 49 hands, there were like 45 in the air, and for us, it was so gratifying, and it's so like you feel very blessed when this happens to you. And related to the way in which we interact with our players, as part of our second round, we actually created like a crowd equity SPV vehicle, so that our players could co-invest alongside institutional investors and angel investors into the studio and actually buy shares of the company. And we're very proud of the well the money that has been invested by our players into the company as well. So yeah, I would say those are the two things that I think we did right and that I'm proud of.
Player centricity, and I love this, and it's definitely what I would recommend. At the end of the day, you are at the service of your user, and it's what you demonstrate in your two examples. Pavel, currently you are in an incubator, Station F. Not everyone is really, familiar about what is an incubator. So can you tell us your thought about it? What is Station F? And is it something you would recommend for people starting a business?
So Station F per se is not an incubator. It's a startup campus that hosts I would say, I think 36 or 37 different incubation programs. And these incubation programs are, some of them are run by corporates, and Ubisoft has one, and we're not part of it. And I think like some of the schools have an incubation program like HEC and EDEC. So basically for alumni of those schools, if they wanting to start a project, they can go there. I think Binance has a startup program. I think Meta has a startup program. I think Microsoft has a startup program there. So we historically have been part of incubators. We were part of two and a half, depending on how you count the third one. But Julie and I started in the incubator of Sciences Po, which is our alma mater. Um, and it was an amazing 2 years that we spent there. It was a very in-person type environment. We had our own tiny office. We were two, and then we were four, and then we were six. It was a really, really lovely place, and I think very fondly of those years. It was very helpful for us in the stage where we were at. So getting things set up, thinking about how do you manage a team of developers when neither of the co-founders has a technical background, which is our case. How do you think about go-to-market strategy when you have no money? How do you think about user experience design? So a lot of those, very, very basic things, including, the administrative stuff. And we talked about support functions earlier in the episode. Like that incubator was incredibly helpful for us in that regard. They didn't take any equity, by the way, which is a common theme. We have never participated in an incubator that took an equity stake in the studio. And it's a core belief that we hold. The second incubator was much more industry specific. We were part of Link, which is part of the network of incubators of Paris and Co. So it's administrated basically by the city of Paris. That's their kind of innovation and startups arm, or wing. And basically that incubator was very much geared towards the creative industries, which obviously includes games. Uh, it was much more like the experts whom we've met there. They were all industry professionals, entrepreneurs, operators in large and mid-sized studios, so they could provide like very hands-on advice, and it was incredibly helpful as well. And the third program was obviously the founders program of Station F, that we've done as well. Um, Contrary to Link, it's very generalist, but what we really liked was precisely the fact that as part of the program you meet a ton of entrepreneurs who are not in the game space and who are facing very different challenges, but that can still be within the same kind of segment. So for example, meeting entrepreneurs who are also in the B2C space, so who sell directly to customers, turns out that many of them are going to have challenges that are quite similar to problems that game studios have. Like how do you craft a compelling marketing message? How do you craft a compelling set of advertisements? How do you do user research? How do you do surveys? How do you identify venture capital funds that invest in the consumer? Because as maybe the audience doesn't know this, but a lot of VCs, especially in Europe, they prefer to invest in business-to-business software as a service companies. I think personally that's a mistake, but that's a separate discussion, I think. But the number of investors who actually invest into consumer companies of which gaming is a part is actually surprisingly small. And so those informal networks of founders that basically do recommendations to this fund or to that investor or to this angel are incredibly valuable.
100%. And it's also what we learn, fortunately or unfortunately. Introduction are always welcome when you are starting something. So I support this. And so, Pavel, it was a joy to have you on the podcast. I'm also really proud, that we spoke about such an impactful project. and also that you gave your true and honest experience about this journey with a marathon, and who I hope nobody think it's just like you come from a corporation and you are going to raise 1 million and it's going to be done. You are going to be Supercell. So just in a certain, in a sentence, I'm really happy to also break this, because it's incredibly rewarding, but it's also incredibly hard and long, and you need to be patient. And I think your story actually was illustrating it perfectly. And I'm really happy you survived, and you're still there, and you are a real example, even for me, just starting. Pavel, so what's next for your studio, and also what can we do to help you?
So there's a correction I must do. We haven't fully finished our second round of funding just yet. We are working on it as we speak, and there are conversations still happening with investors. But a lot of angels who we have already convinced, a couple of venture capital funds as well. So that's really good news. But the round is still in progress. What's next? What's next is the basically the beta release of Nebulae, which is our game about playable politics and collective governance in space, which, if all goes well on the funding side, we'll be seeing the beta by the end of this year. And this is when we actually will be able to upgrade from the alpha, which was very much about single player planetary governor, like you're on your planet, you're alone, nobody disturbs you, and you kind of make political decisions that are impactful, but that only have an impact on you. And during the beta, we will be kind of moving one level up, and so now it's going to be a number of planets, each of the planets still governed by one player, but now they have to coexist together, and they have to kind of structure the political decisions as part of a nation to which they all belong. So this is going to be the next phase. We're super excited about this. There are a lot of the game mechanics that we have kind of already tested, kind of off prototype, and I was talking about the playtests that we did at a school, and those were obviously part of it. So in terms of designing political systems and designing gameplay loops that rely on political decision making and their recurrence, and the clashes of influence between people who have opposing political views in the context of a game, I think is going to be very, very interesting. So we're very much looking forward to that, and that's what we're focused on right now.
Nice, nice. Any date in mind where we are going to be able to test it?
Well, there is a version of the game for the planetary management that is already available on the Google Play Store. So if you type Nebulae, Nebulae, you can already find it there. For the beta, I prefer not to pronounce any specific dates in mind, because you and I know, everybody knows, like things happen in game development, and I prefer not to set expectations so that then people are disappointed.
100%. So I hope everyone took notes. Nebulae. Don't hesitate to go for it in the store, and also reach Pavel. Thank you, Pavel, for having been with us. It was a really insightful, episode, giving the truth and also the reality of entrepreneurship. And also, I really enjoyed all your feedback, and also all your reflection on what went well, but also, what also didn't went well. And you have a lot of win so fast. Actually, when we think about it, about the time frame, it's quite impressive. So your team is definitely doing good. Thank you, Pavel.
Thank you, Claire. Thank you so much for having me, and to all of the members of the audience. Stay super passionate and build big and audacious things, because that's how I personally believe you're going to be making a difference in the industry. It's going to be harder, but it's so worth it. Trust me.
100%. Thank you, Pavel, and have a good day. Bye bye.
Bye.
Thank you so much for listening. If you like it, please subscribe and share it to your friends. It's really um, making me super happy to share all those insights, and your support is really appreciated. So take care and see you soon in Rzain Society.